Hi students, welcome to lesson number 27, interview schedule. Now let us start with the introduction. An interview schedule is a list containing a set of structured questions that is prepared to serve as a guide for interviewers, researchers and investigators in collection information or data about a specific topic or issue. The schedule will be used by the interviewer, who will fill in the questions with the answers received during the actual interview. Now let us start with the objectives. The lesson objectives are: 1. To study the meaning of interview schedule. 2. To know the characteristics of the schedule. 3. To learn the advantages and disadvantages of the tool. Now let us start with the meaning and definition of interview schedule. A schedule is a set of questions with structured answers to guide an observer, the interviewer, researcher or investigator. It is a plan or guideline for investigation. According to Thomas Carson's, the schedule is nothing but a list of questions which is necessary to test the hypothesis. In simple words, schedule is a set of questions formulated and presented with specific purpose or for testing an assumption or hypothesis. According to Good and Hat, a set of questions which are asked by an interviewer and filled in on the spot in a face-to-face interaction with another person is called as interview schedule. According to
𝗧𝗧
a form of questions which the interviewer keeps with himself and filled it as he proceeds his enquiry. According to 𝗵𝗵, it is a name applied to a set of questions which are asked and filled in by the investigator himself. From the above definitions, we can understand that it is a set of questions along with their answers asked and filled in by the interviewer in a face-to-face meeting with interviewee. Now let us study the characteristics of interview schedule. 1. The indication of the interviewee's awareness of the purpose of the interview and time conceiving is provided in schedule. 2. The questions are to be prepared to provide answers relevant to the topic. If the interview is for purposes of research or investigation, the questions should answer the main problem of investigation. 3. The questions should be relevant or have an impact on the purpose or objective of the interview. Remove any irrelevant questions or those with answers that won't be of any use to investigator. 4. It takes the one step at a time approach, with each question meant to tackle only one issue instead of addressing several issues all at once. This has a tendency to confuse not only the interviewee but also the interviewer and result in the latter losing control over the direction of interview. 5. Instead of using questions answerable with a yes or no, the questions are open-ended, which can be used as a starting or reference point for more questions. This way, the interviewer can go deeper in getting information he needs. The questions are neutral, avoiding leading questions that have the potential to dictate the answer to the interviewee. Now, the advantages of an interview schedule. A form of questions which the interviewer keeps with himself and filled it as he proceeds his enquiry. The interview schedule allows interviewers to get more information, since they can ask follow-up queries or clarifications to the questions they have prepared. Thus, the information gathered is more relevant and useful. Often, interviews are time bound. Interviewers are given only a limited amount of time to ask all their questions and get the answers. If he comes prepared with the schedule, then he can utilize that time properly. Otherwise, time will be wasted and he gets anything substantial from the interview. The interview schedule offers flexibility and customization and may be used when interviewing different types of people. The interviewer can prepare it with the respondents in mind. For example, an interviewer may have prepared a job interview schedule for the recruitment of a junior assistant when he is given the responsibility to interview the candidates for a managerial post. He may also use the same schedule but with many adjustments. The disadvantages of an interview schedule are: interview schedule is time consuming. Prior to preparation of the interview schedule, much research must be done to prepare the good questions. This preparation takes enough time of an interviewer, especially if it is for an extensive or in-depth interview. When using the interview schedule, there is a high risk that the interview and its results may suffer from the bias of the interviewer, as he is the one that will choose the questions to be asked during the interview. The interview schedule is used to different interviewers and it may result with a variability. This may result to unreliable information gathered during the interviews. Now, let us learn the types of interview schedules. There are two major types of interview schedules or guides that are widely used by interviewers. 1. The in-depth interview schedule. This type of schedule is used for open-ended interviews which aims at obtaining in-depth information, often on very important topics or sensitive issues. The questions are open-ended with prompts provided for the interviewer to ask for clarification or further information if necessary. The interviewee is given more space to talk about all the topics that will arise up during the interview. So, he is free to use his own words and let the ideas flow out of him easily. Second one, the structured interview schedule. This type of interview schedule is often compared with the format used in survey forms or the questionnaires because of their similarities. The difference lies in the usage. Obviously, the interview schedule is used by the interviewer during a face-to-face interaction, while the questionnaire is simply filled out by the respondent. This interview schedule contains the questions that will be asked, and it is also where the interviewer will record the answers to those questions. Essentially, preparing an interview schedule for a structured interview is the same as preparing a questionnaire. It's just that the questionnaire will be used solely by the interviewer and the respondent or interviewee will not get lay their eyes on the contents. For more flexibility, however, some interviewers combine the features of these two types when they prepare their interview schedule. It would really be up to the interviewer and what he deems to be most effective in achieving his objectives. The interview schedule has different patterns. Generally, the format will depend on the type and purpose of the interview being conducted, as well as the target respondents or interviewees. And however, the interview schedule have three major parts. 1. The opening model. This is also called as the stage of warm-up, where the objective is to create an atmosphere that will accommodate the open and free flow of ideas between the interviewer and interviewee, whether it is one-on-one or in a group. At the start of the interview, the interviewer should welcome the interviewee and make an effort to put him at ease. If the respondent is relaxed, the interview is likely to go smoothly. The interviewer will then proceed to inform the interviewee of the following: A. The objectives of the interview. The interviewee deserves to know why the interview is taking place and why he is involved in. B. To make the interviewee feel ease or comfortable, the topics that will be discussed in the course of the interview, like an advanced warning or what he will be asked, should be clearly mentioned. C. The interviewee does not want to be kept guessing throughout the course of the interview when it will end, or if he will have to spend the whole day talking to the interviewer. This part of the interview schedule may be formatted in such a way that it fits the interview's personality and even that of the interviewee. The investigator should motivate the interviewee in such a way that he would like to feel that he will benefit in some way from this interview if his answer to the questions properly and accurately. If he don't, he may not be inclined to answer the questions, much less the given good answers. 2. Body. The core discussion comprises the topics and the questions to be asked. Again, the content will depend on the topic and the type of interview. Very important is that the investigator should never overlook is that the questions should fulfill the objective of the interview. instead of an interview outline which includes only a list of topics and subtopics. A typical interview schedule also contains major questions as well as the follow-up questions designed to probe or clarify the answers to the previously asked major questions. When preparing the body of the interview schedule, it is important to leave more than enough space where the interviewer may write down the responses or answers of the interviewee. Closing. The interview is about to be closed up. The reason that it is included in the interview schedule is to ensure that the interview will not end abruptly, which may come across as rude to the interviewee. The closing will cover the main points in summary that were talked about during the interview, followed by a brief discussion on the next steps that will be taken after the interview. In few cases, an interview schedule may be simple, which contains only the important points such as the purpose of the interview, the date, time and location of the conduct of the interview, and the names and contact details of both the interviewer and the interviewee. Now, let us study how to make use of the interview schedule, that is the usage of interview schedule. The main concern in the preparation of an interview schedule is on the questions. What should be asked and how should they be asked? But that is not all. Even the order or sequence of asking the questions also matters, which is why it should also be reflected on the interview schedule. 1. Do not start the interview with a question probing into any personal information of the interviewee unless the purpose of the interview is to talk about his personal life. If it is a job interview, it would be better to get him to talk about his skills, qualifications and work experiences, since that his comfort zone. 2. Start with the simple questions or those that will not immediately put the interviewee or respondent on his guard. The interviewer should be able to answer the questions easily. Then you can move on gradually to the more sensitive or difficult topics. If you started with a controversial question or something that will make the interviewee uncomfortable, that will set a grim tone for the rest of the interview. 3. The general rule is for the investigator is to group the questions in a logical manner. He can start with general questions and work his way towards the specific questions later on. He may have to be flexible at times, especially when a general question must be followed by a specific question in order to clarify something. 4. If the investigator is using both open-ended and closed questions, it would be a good idea to mix them up instead of asking all the closed questions first and then the open-ended ones in the later half of the interview. 5. The investigator should know about their background, at least so he can prepare questions that will resonate with them. If he is going to interview candidates for some position, he can frame the questions so that the candidates will be able to prove whether they are qualified for the job or not. So, he can come up with the proper and relevant questions. Sixth one, avoid using the complicated and highly technical terms unless the investigator is completely sure that the interviewee is familiar with them. Try using simple language to avoid confusion. Stay away from colloquial terms and jargon, especially when there are better, easier to understand alternatives that he can use. Sentence structure is also important. Questions structured into long and run-on sentences may confuse him both, and the interviewee may miss the main point that he is asking about. As earlier mentioned, as much as possible, each question should address a single issue. Avoid placing too many questions in a single sentence to be read in one breath. Seventh one, provide adequate space where he can record or write the answers or responses to each question. There is an option to use a recorder during the interview in case there are some points that he failed to record on the interview schedule. If he is going to use one, he has to inform the interviewee about it at the start of the interview and get his consent to record the interview. Eighth one, as interviewer, he has to familiarize himself with the interview schedule. He wants the interview to flow naturally, and he definitely don't want to sound stilted when asking the questions, or worse, as if he rehearsed it. Now, let us sum up. To sum up the lesson, what we have learnt is the interview schedule means a form of questions which the interviewer keeps with himself and filled it as he proceeds with enquiry. Interview schedule allows interviewers to get more information since they can ask follow-up queries or clarifications to the questions they have prepared. Thus, the information gathered is more relevant and useful. Often, interviews are time bound. The main concern in the preparation of an interview schedule is on the questions. What should be asked and how should they be asked? But that it is not all. Even the order or sequence of asking the questions also matters, which is why it should also be reflected on the interview schedule. Thank you.